Hello, Chris. Hope you're doing well today. So today will not be like a full playthrough or anything in Mayhem. I mostly wanted to talk about some things and showcase a couple of small things, but there were a lot more changes than I was expecting. Not from the implementation of the auto part. The auto part was mostly easy. Let's chat a little bit. The problem is, oh my gosh, chat, the UI, the menus, and the structuring is horrible. I'm sure chat has heard me complain about this before, but it is my least favorite part of coding. I absolutely am not a UI person, so I've been taking forever to hook some of the stuff in. Some of it is like a technical gap because I just haven't done it before. So like when we're generating a list, for example, of cooldowns and actions and things like that, how you would do that in C# / Visual Studio. I'm like, huh, okay, I don't think I've done this before. So I got past that roadblock yesterday. But then there's just like little things like when you change the difficulty, making sure every single option is updated correctly, and then figuring out what those options should be. I was like, oh, what a headache, chat. Some of that is more tedium than difficulty. So it's just been painful to test, chat. But I do want to show a couple of things since we're here. In fact, let me just boot up the game. Might be easier just to demonstrate with the game window. So I'm not entirely sure if it is in a testable state because I was doing stuff at like super early in the morning, which is always the worst time to code. So we'll see. I have a feeling it'll crash, but if it'll crash, it'll at least teach me something because I haven't tested it since, I don't know, last week. That's a big question mark, chat. We'll let it boot in the background. I just want to show something since we're here. I don't want to confuse people by going into Mayhem because it'll have the commands. We'll just leave it on Let's Chat for a little bit. Talk about a couple of small things. Oh, minimizing that minimizes everything. I want to do that. I'm going to hear the game attempting to do things, but that's fine. 1 second. Oh, this window's SotN. Okay, perfect. That's actually the one I wanted to show. Sure, you could capture my cursor too. Why not? Who cares? The one thing I just want to kind of go through, I'm still trying to work out how the look and feel of it should be, which is a problem and kind of annoying. So just like small things to talk about. I now have an option for Cubozoe starter because I know some ROM hacks assume that you have this. So I just added that in as an option. This is like something small that was easy to do. Some rearrangement of the items here. Now this thing is such a pain in the butt, chat. I don't even know if this is going to work because I don't think I pushed the latest build. But essentially, chat, every time you touch something in this custom set, it will update every single field here. So I'm going to go see if this is the version that updates it or not. If it doesn't, it's not a big deal. Yeah, I don't see it updating there. It's not a big deal. So essentially, I will just go over the intended options of the game since I think these options for the most part are finalized. The only thing I'm thinking of removing is probably this one. I think everything else will be implemented by next week or like full-on testing. Apparently my controller went to sleep. Thank you, controller. So essentially, chat, actually, let me just blow this up since it's only one small thing. Can't see it anymore. Blow it up a little bigger, chat. You don't have to squint. The one thing I'm looking to do with the auto options is when you set the difficulty, it's going to set the amount of commands that have to occur before a relic is allowed. But I feel like this might be a little redundant with something I'm going to talk about later. This is more like a safety catch, I guess. I guess it is possible it wouldn't hit this number of commands. We'll see. I'm probably going to start it at around 200 or so and see how that feels. But as I said before, it's probably going to end up being redundant. Mayhem Pity, I think we talked about on another stream, where essentially if the player is dead, I want it to give beneficial abilities. I think for both of these options, it's going to be sets of 3. And for both of these, it's going to trigger into the mood system. So no matter what mood the game Auto-Mayhem is currently in, I think this is going to force it to be benefit, and this is going to force it to be angry. So those are mostly done. I don't think I have it in a testable state to showcase, but all the backend code is there. I just have to hook it in. And then there's two things that basically define how easy or hard the game will be. So essentially, there's going to be the command speed. So I think right now the default is it does a command every 2 seconds. So you could speed it up. Yeah, see, it's going to be grumpy at me because I left this blank. Something in there for now. But you could do something like normal would be like 1 second. I guess I could also put more descriptors here, but I feel like this is probably okay for UI purposes. Oh, chat can actually see the drop-down window, I just noticed. That's interesting. Okay, you're gonna have to trust me, there's other options. I'll just use the arrow keys there. So essentially normal, I think, is once every 2 seconds, and then the slowest is once every 2.8, and the fastest is 1.6, I think, seconds. But where the other difficulty balancer is that for the consistency, for example, this basically says that even though it checks every 2 seconds, it will not necessarily put a command every 2 seconds. So I believe I'm gonna put it in a range of like about, trying to think of the best way to describe it. So basically, this is determining the odds it will skip. So I think I will put this at either 5 or 0, and this will probably be at the highest 70. Or excuse me, reverse order. So highest would be, it's super consistent, so you're going to get more commands, so this is going to have like the 5% odds. But if you put it on low consistency, it's probably going to skip commands. And one thing I did in kind of like the back end is that even though it's doing basically a dice roll whether or not to even do anything at the command speed, essentially I'm also making sure the low consistency has a forced number of skips. It's not a high number of skips, don't get me wrong. I think it's at the lowest setting, I think it's literally 2, but I think at like low, it's 1, for example. So it's not like a crazy amount of required skips, but I just want to make sure it feels the odds kind of accordingly. So we'll see. Those might end up being too slow. We'll see. I have to see how it feels. I haven't tested it yet for the most part. There's also the mood swings. So the mood swings, I think, is just determining what level, for the most part, the mood can get up to. This part is very much work in progress. So I already have a check for mood and what the moods do, but making sure the level is there is something that is not ready, not even today, and definitely will be probably for next week. Now, by default, this should be enabled. As I said before, I'm still messing with this UI. I hate the UI, chat. It's my least favorite thing. So by default, everything would be enabled. You allow all the curses. So I believe the starting weight, I think, is something like this. So even on the normal well, I think that's actually not correct. I think even for the normal difficulty, I believe it's still slightly weighted towards curses, I think. I think easy makes it pure neutral, but I think for our normal, more often than not, I want to see the curses. By default, I have something called mood percentage, which what I'm looking to do here is by default, everything should be 1, more or less. And this is the dice roll it does whenever it does a command to determine if it is put into a mood. Once it's in a mood, it's going to stay in the mood for X number of commands, and that's going to be based off of the mood swing value here. So this is definitely TBD what this value will be. I think tentatively I'm saying it has to go through a minimum of 10 commands before it goes down a level. But again, I'm going to set it up a bit more accordingly with the mood swings. Right now, I think everything defaults to 1 on the normal difficulty. So basically, this is just saying the minimum. I don't know the best way to write this, and chat can definitely chime in if they have suggestions. But basically, these two fields are determining how many times in a row, minimum, a certain command has to occur. So I think on the defaults, it's just 1, because it could just be 1 and completely random. And max is the number of times it could do a blessing before it is forced to do something else. Now, it doesn't mean it can't do 5 blessings, 1 neutral, and then 5 blessings again. But I want to make sure, because I don't want it to literally just be like, oops, all curses. Unless you pick a higher difficulty, then I do things like removing the chance of it being in a good mood. So it will just be perpetually bad mood and slowly kind of decrease the weight system of it. Yeah, these don't. I don't think on this build these are checked, but I don't think they do anything. So I'll just save it. I have some default values there. The one thing I was still experimenting on, and I finally got it to work yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally, because I have no idea how this stuff works. You can see I still have to work on the exact size of this window. So I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close, chat. I have to make this one a little smaller to account for this. But essentially what needs to happen is that because there is no bot, chat, I need to be able to define potential cooldowns. And for the most part, I left it at 0 because I want it to use a lot of commands. So it'll probably have its own balancing sheet for default values. So when I go to do the formal update for this, it's going to be completely chaotic because I have to define every single one of these. But essentially what I'm looking to do, chat, is just to make sure that, as I said, this might end up being redundant, but things like Swap Relics and Pandemonium have a forced cooldown no matter what. And then after that point, it can spawn at random. So I kind of want it to be sort of similar to the bot, but not entirely. Like things like Pain Trade or Hearts Only or Unarmed. You can see I put no timers in there. So if the game wants to stack 1,000,000 of them, I'm not going to say no. So fortunately, we've been working on a lot of command stacking in general, so it's not a big deal. But I think there are some ones that are probably too powerful. And this is also very much a work in progress. Not as in this portion hasn't been implemented, but what the balancing of this should be for an auto versus like a user perspective. Like, what if it is truly random? What would be fair? So some of these 10-second ones, I might even just reduce it back to 0. I was thinking tentatively, I don't want it to stack things like underwater all the time, tentatively. I think right now this one defaulted to 0, but we'll see. So some of these 10-second ones I might just reduce down to 0 because I don't think ultimately it matters. I think where it does matter is things like Major Boon. I don't want it to Major Boon every like 5 seconds, in particular if it's in a certain pool. And I feel like swap equipment every 5 seconds would be kind of annoying. So there's ones where I find it's more like, I don't care if it happens, but there's some that are disruptive if they're used back to back to back to back to back. So there's some sanity cooldowns in here. So anyway, so this allows for a more customized Auto-Mayhem, if nothing else. As you can see, I call this Auto-Act. Chat, I have no idea what to call things. So if you have any suggestions, I was trying to fit it within the this number of tab letters here. So I wanted to call it Auto something. Essentially just toggling this off or on should be good to go. Hey Jonas, hope you're doing well. We're just briefly chatting about SotN Mayhem, and I think you were interested in some Vampire Survivors. So we'll be playing that in a couple minutes. Hopefully you're doing well. Also, I realized the title screen of SotN has no music. Wakey wakey my controller. Boop boop badoop chat. Let's have some subtle background music. I'm sure it's not super loud. So those are mostly the UI components. And I will say from a development standpoint, weighting is done, min is done, max is done. Threshold is checked, but we're not realistically going to see that today. Difficulty is technically done. It doesn't do anything by itself. It just sets all these values. But the UI is broken, so UI is its own thing. Back end, it's done. Front end, it's not working. Command speed. Oh, let's not put that on fastest. We'll put that back to normal. I believe all of these save the field values, I think. But I still have to add in validation for all of this, and that is taking me forever. I find that so boring, and I'm so sorry, chat. I'm just like, I can't will myself to do like, it has to be between this number and this number. It has to be the numeric and not alphabetical. And trying to do that for 12 fields, I feel like I'm just like, help me, chat. Someone please do this for me. It's not that it's hard, I just find it very tedious to rename things over and over and over. So I have to will myself to get through this eventually. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly boot up the game in the background, and if the game crashes, we're not going to showcase anything. I don't know what build this is, and I don't feel like testing it further. I will say though, chat, probably I don't know if it'll be next week, but at some point I need to actually beat the game again for the new BizHawk. So I don't have like full area access for testing. Give me 1 second, chat. Actually, I think I could showcase something else. Yeah, I want to showcase one more menu. The one thing I had to do for the updates, and this one should be working hopefully, is that whenever you go to start the Mayhem, I now have like a new set of options. So for example, I could choose to start Auto-Mayhem, which should be this. So some of the colors were not my initial pick, but I just picked what was there in the base branch. So I could, for example, start the Auto-Mayhem, and then when I go to start it, I could see what errors it gives me, if anything. Let me check. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay, so it's not ready for testing. That's fine. What did I miss? So I'm just gonna make a note here because I haven't tested this in forever. I'm sure I'm missing just like a timer or something weird. Looks like it. Yeah, it looks like I missed a timer. Not a big deal. Make a note for later. So there is a lot of work that still needs to be done on it for sure. But I just wanted to give the progress update. I have like some of the front end done and a lot of the back end is ready, but because of the front end not setting values correctly, it's kind of hard to showcase. So that's basically what I wanted to go over today. One other thing I want to talk about, and let's just add this here. One is set up already. I think my notes are visible. Let me hide this. You don't need to see this anymore. Yes, this is what I wanted to talk about. So outside of the work in progress changes, which is like so many things I have to type up for the notes chat. I added new Richter Colors. So shout outs to Chris. So we'll make you in the formal patch notes. We talked about the cube is always on. One thing I didn't really talk about that this is, yeah, this does require the latest version of BizHawk, and that is working with controller support for Octoshot and Nymashok. Don't ask me to explain it. I just ported over some changes and had to make a few small tweaks. I cannot go into technical details. I don't know the engine that well. But what I can say is that I'm going to end up nerfing Unarmed. So right now, I think that this will be the only real balance change planned. Question mark. So I'm going to nerf the strength bonus at level 1 for Unarmed, and I'm going to remove some of the extended iframes at level 2. I'm going to make sure it feels more like more of a challenge command. Like right now, it just feels like Easy Street. So I feel like level 1 will be, it'll actually feel like more of a challenge, and level 2 will still be good. It'll still get the strength bonus and the defense bonus, but then I'm going to move like the iframes over to level 3. So I feel like the progression's there a little more. I might have to change this. I'm not sure. If this is too weak by itself, I might improve the strength bonus by a very small amount temporarily, like 5 or 10. So this one I'm going to have to test with the chat to see how that feels. But 20 is too high, for sure. 20 is definitely too high. So if I even half the number, I would be mostly probably okay with that. Anyway, chat, I think that's it for my notes. So nothing to really showcase today because the UI is a total mess. But we'll be going into it, I think, at some point next week. So probably next week will be the more formal testing. I was thinking I would get a little further today, but most of my technical time ended up being with controller issues. Unfortunately, that ate like so many hours out of my planned coding time. But I think I'm mostly happy with the progress I've made. But next week, I think will be a big test of it for sure. So it's so everything I think is just pushed back a week. So the initial test I think will be next week, and then UI cleanup will be the week after. So probably in 2 weeks the patch will be ready more or less, and we'll go through it one more time. But I think for now it is what it is. So that's the only SotN update I really wanted. As I said before, it was going to end up being short, I think, even in the Twitch title. But I guess for people that were interested, it's getting there. So if you have any suggestions on menu names or things like that, just let me know. Otherwise, most of those things are hooked into the back end, but I think it's just grumpy at me because I changed the timer. I guess one thing I didn't directly mention is that I had to do a lot more changes than I was expecting to get the UI portion to work correctly. So what I'm talking about is like when you add the cooldowns to something, I needed to make sure that when you run that same list into Auto-Mayhem, it's able to queue those commands directly. So I had to redo basically every command, which was very annoying. I wasn't expecting to have to do that. I probably should have expected it, but I didn't expect me to do that. So I had to reword a couple of things and add a couple more flags for every single option, and then I had to test that a few times. So hopefully next week will be a bit smoother in terms of testing, but I think it is what it is, chat. So anyway, that's it for the SotN update. So sorry people if you were expecting to go through a formal game today, because I think I did talk about potentially doing it today. Unfortunately, today is not that day. So I guess we'll say goodbye to YouTube. I guess I could upload this. Probably okay. For the people that are interested, the game is not dead. It's just taking a while. So long YouTube. Stick around, chat. We're going to switch over to a new game.